Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël.
This brings me to the last point I want to make tonight, which is, when we're done, we believe that we will have made the case overwhelmingly of the president's guilt. That is, he's done what he's charged with. He withheld the money, he withheld the meeting, he used it to coerce Ukraine to do these political investigations, he covered it up, he obstructed us, he's trying to obstruct you, and he's violated the Constitution. But I want to address one other thing tonight. Okay, he's guilty. Okay, he's guilty. Does he really need to be removed? Does he really need to be removed? We have an election coming up. Does he really need to be removed? He's guilty. You know, is there really any doubt about this? I mean, do we really have any doubt about the facts here? Does anybody really question whether the president is capable of what he's charged with? No one is really making the argument Donald Trump would never do such a thing. Because of course we know that he would, and of course we know that he did. It's a somewhat different question, though, to ask, okay, it's pretty obvious, whether we can say it publicly or we can't say it publicly, we all know what we're dealing here with this president. But does he really need to be removed? And this is why he needs to be removed. Donald Trump chose Rudy Giuliani over his own intelligence agencies. He chose Rudy Giuliani over his own FBI director. He chose Rudy Giuliani over his own national security advisors. When all of them were telling him this Ukraine 2016 stuff is kooky, crazy Russian propaganda, he chose not to believe them. He chose to believe Rudy Giuliani. That makes him dangerous to us, to our country. That was Donald Trump's choice. Now, why would Donald Trump believe a man like Rudy Giuliani over a man like Christopher Wray? Okay? Why would anyone in their right mind believe Rudy Giuliani over Christopher Wray? Because he wanted to, and because what Rudy was offering him was something that would help him personally. And what Christopher Wray was offering him was merely the truth. What Christopher Wray was offering him was merely the information he needed to protect his country and its elections. But that's not good enough. What's in it for him? What's in it for Donald Trump? This is why he needs to be removed. Now, you may be asking, how much damage can he really do in the next several months until the election? A lot. A lot of damage. Now, we just saw last week a report that Russia tried to hack, or maybe did hack, Burisma. Okay? I don't know if they got in. I'm trying to find out. My colleagues on the Intel Committee, House and Senate, we're trying to find out, did the Russians get in? What are the Russian plans and intentions? Well, let's say they got in. And let's say they start dumping documents to interfere in the next election. Let's say they start dumping some real things they hacked from Burisma. Let's say they start dumping some fake things they didn't hack from Burisma, but they want you to believe they did. Let's say they start blatantly interfering in our election again to help Donald Trump. Can you have the least bit of confidence that Donald Trump will stand up to them and protect our national interest over his own personal interest? You know you can't, which makes him dangerous to this country. You know you can't. You know you can't count on him. None of us can. None of us can. What happens if China got the message? Now, you can say, well, he's just joking. Of course, he didn't really mean China should investigate the Bidens. You know that's no joke. Now, maybe you could have argued 3 years ago when he said, hey, Russia, if you're listening, hack Hillary's emails. Maybe you could give him a freebie and say he was joking. But now we know better. Hours after he did that, Russia did, in fact, try to hack Hillary's emails. There's no mulligan here when it comes to our national security. So what if China does overtly or covertly start to help the Trump campaign? You think he's going to call him out on it? Or you think he's going to give him a better trade deal on it? Can any of us really have the confidence that Donald Trump will put his personal interests ahead of the national interest? Is there really any evidence in this presidency that should give us the ironclad confidence that he would do so? You know you can't count on him to do that. That's the sad truth. You know you can't count on him to do that. The American people deserve a president they can count on to put their interest first. To put their interest first. Colonel Vindman said, here right matters. Here right matters. Well, let me tell you something. If right doesn't matter, it doesn't matter how good the Constitution is. It doesn't matter how brilliant the framers were. It doesn't matter how good or bad our advocacy in this trial is. Doesn't matter how well written the oath of impartiality is. If right doesn't matter, we're lost. If the truth doesn't matter, we're lost. The framers couldn't protect us from ourselves if right and truth don't matter. And you know that what he did was not right. You know, that's what they do in the old country that Colonel Vindman's father came from, or the old country that my great-grandfather came from, or the old countries that your ancestors came from, or maybe you came from. But here, right is supposed to matter. It's what's made us the greatest nation on earth. No constitution can protect us. Right doesn't matter anymore. And you know you can't trust this president do what's right for this country. You can trust he will do what's right for Donald Trump. He'll do it now. He's done it before. He'll do it for the next several months. He'll do it in the election if he's allowed to. This is why, if you find him guilty, you must find that he should be removed. Because right matters. Because right matters. And the truth matters. Otherwise, we are lost.
It is Friday, the 24th of January of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, for those of you who are past the noon hour, wherever you are in the world, the French 77s are available for your imbibing pleasure. I would suggest that for any of those who are not past the noon hour in your locality, should probably wait on the French 77s, because you may be sleeping the day away, especially if you have about 1.5. 2 is sometimes too much, so do take care. Well, we had another one of those Schiff speeches for the ages, as I said yesterday. How many of those does a guy get in one lifetime, let alone during an impeachment trial? Man, he probably would make a good president, don't you think? I think it's a little too late for him to jump in. Though, if those of you who are old enough to remember, and maybe you are, maybe you're not, you may be old enough, but you don't remember, is that Bobby Kennedy jumped into the race way late. Really, really late in the process. And back in the day, they had the California primary in June, and then in mere months, you had the general election. So there was actually a lot of people who had not made up their mind, and candidates who could garner the endorsement that late in the game. But I like where Schiff is right now, because we need a police dog, and we need them to be dogged, and he certainly is. And what an orator, boy. So Trump today tweeted off that he's so upset that his counsel there at the table won't be able to present their cover-up until Saturday, and that's Death Valley for TV. Wow. Gee, so you mean the gaslighting will not be televised? He wants the gaslighting to be televised. And I doubt very much that we being, the liberal side of the spectrum and media types, I don't think we will be breaking away from the gaslighting that White House counsel will be presenting for the public record, with no pushback, nothing from Judge Roberts. But I got to tell you, as soon as someone on the Democratic side drinks something other than water and milk, they will be arrested, because Susan Collins will write a note to Roberts about it. What a narc. Could not push back on any of the constant lying. I actually thought you were supposed to present truthful evidence, but apparently the Senate rules say that you don't need to. Because if you present only truthful evidence from both sides, their side loses. So, of course, Moscow Mitch McConnell is going to have the trappings of a so-called trial, a kangaroo trial. And who's being kangarooed? The Constitution and democracy itself. That is what is on trial, not Donald Trump. So the uneven-handedness of the balls and strikes guy, I make the joke that he would never call a foul ball on the home team, and he has not yet. The only time that they had an admonishment about their constant lying was after Susan Collins wrote a note to Robert saying, "It is so untoward for them to tell the world that we're liars and we're covering up." Well, that's exactly what you're doing, and the whole world sees it, Susan. And old John Roberts lives in his little bubble, which he's lived in for a very long time. Way back in the 70s. He could not see what was being seen. He was a little concerned about Michael Jackson's music back in the day. I wonder why. I wonder why he would have been concerned about Michael Jackson music. Yeah. You know why. There's a certain hue that he will not hew at all. So we have jurors who flaunt the rules that they made up. They can read books. They can tweet. They can fidget spin. They can do Fox interviews while Schiff is speaking. They just walk right out of the room. Lindsey Graham left for a half an hour or more. I mentioned that yesterday. Well, he did it again. Now, of course, reporters did notice last night that there were no less than 17 GOP senators whose seats were empty, and they noticed 2 on the Democrat side. Of course, those 2 had to go to the bathroom and they came right back. Didn't hear about that. Almost 20 senators on the GOP side missing, 2 on our side. So that evens it out. Both sides, folks. They're not taking it seriously. And then you got Fox News summarizing in their indelible way about the proceedings and the testimony. None of their viewers are going to hear the actual words coming from Schiff's mouth, but they'll have a silent, moving image of him jerking and moving about as if he is a crazy man. You know, when you watch the actual C-SPAN feed, he does not jerk. But you look at the Fox one, it's like they did a little bit of stop-action stuff going on there to make it look like he has some sort of tic. What's up with that? Propagandists got a propaganda now, don't they? But I will say that when Reuters, which is not a bastion of liberalism by any means, when Reuters has a poll that comes out that says 72 or more % says this guy needs to be impeached, and I think what they mean is that we need witnesses. And the removal from office number is perilously high for Trump, but it doesn't matter. So what? We can only hope that we have enough wherewithal to secure our elections in some fashion. You know, it's really going to come down on the county level. It really is. And we have to hope that those county election officials love America enough and the integrity of the elections that they'll be on the lookout, which they are already. The FBI is in communication down on the county level, by the way. Wow, look at the time. It's Friday, though. And it looks like we're going to have even more Democratic testimony from from the House managers today. And I don't know when questions occur. I need to look that up again. You know, the questions that will be read by Balls and Strikes, John Roberts. But there's that process. So we'll go through that. You know that the other side will demand that we have to have Hunter Biden and Joe are not being impeached. And we've already had these investigations on them 3 or 4 times already, by the way. But it's all a deflection. Because everybody knows what a mobster this guy is, and he owes big time. Big time. He's fighting for his literal life. Do not doubt that. This is all because this is not to hold on to some licensed property. He's in so deep, he is fighting for his life. Vlad has a convenient way of dealing with people who owe or who has piqued his ire. Very convenient. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy as we start off? Well, Pennsylvania Republicans push to weaken the court that caught them rigging elections. They can't win by following the rules, so they cheat. And when they get caught cheating, they'll just get rid of the umpires and the cops, too. So much for law and order. A Kentucky official pushes a voter suppression bill that could help Moscow Mitch McConnell's campaign. Of course, he's a good old boy now, isn't he? And the Wisconsin GOP fights to keep their unfair gerrymandered election maps. Like I said, they can't win without cheating. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where the United Nations says its officials have been barred from using WhatsApp since last June of 2019 over severe security issues. And the U.S. denied Britain's extradition request for the diplomat's wife who killed that British teenager last year. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly, for doing so. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. You will then hopefully notice our Patreon link, and please do become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Your recurring patronage really does help us pay our bills and amass the funds that we need to get newish machinery, and we are forever grateful for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio, and we thank Tom for taking care of that. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam, a fair place to follow me at, because I do post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. And then that gets pushed out on social media. And at Justice Putnam is one of those destinations, along with the show's Twitter account at Cookbook West. And most importantly, do pick up podcasts of the show by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. Alrighty. Well, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy as we truly begin our morning. Look at the time. And Sam Levine of The Guardian brings us this first offering. 2 years ago, Pennsylvania's Supreme Court dealt a blow to state Republicans when it said they had unconstitutionally rigged congressional elections in the state. Republicans fumed and threatened to impeach 4 of the justices, but the map was redrawn, and voters elected an even split of Democrats and Republicans to Congress in 2018. Now, Republicans are weaponizing a new tactic, a move that seems designed to increase their power on the state's highest court. Well, of course, the Federalist Society told them to do it, lest I remind you that a judicial watchdog ethics group, part of the judiciary, well, senior judicial types who pass opinion, judgment on ethics and behavior of judges, said do not associate with the Federalist Society. Okay. The Republican proposal overhauls the way that court justices are elected in a state that can swing both red and blue. The justices on the court, where Democrats hold a 5-2 majority, are currently appointed through statewide elections. But the new plan would make it so the justices are elected from districts throughout the state. The change would probably hurt Democratic candidates. 4 of the current justices are from the Pittsburgh area, and 1 is from Philadelphia. Both urban areas that tend to skew blue and have lots and lots and lots of black people. Darn it. If the proposal is successful, it could offer a roadmap for Republicans elsewhere to undermine state courts. Oh, you mean democracy itself? That's significant after last year's Supreme Court decision that determined federal courts could not stop gerrymandering, the partisan redistricting of state maps, but that nothing stopped state courts from acting. State courts responded swiftly. A state court in North Carolina followed Pennsylvania and struck down electoral districts as unconstitutional gerrymanders there. And a slew of gerrymandering lawsuits are expected when districts are next redrawn in 2021. They're all about states' rights until states' rights determines that they don't want Republican cheating any more than the rest of us do. With the Pennsylvania Supreme Court having struck down the General Assembly's gerrymandering, the General Assembly is now clearly trying to gerrymander the Pennsylvania Supreme Court itself, said Daniel Jacobson, an attorney who helped represent the plaintiffs in the gerrymandering case. It only goes to show the lengths that the General Assembly leaders will go when they feel that their grip on power is threatened. Well, it's not only feeling it. Their grip on power is not only threatened, it is being yanked away because they're a bunch of crooks. Anti-democratic buffoons. Get rid of them. We don't need that kind of caustic element in the great experiment. No. The Republican effort also comes as state lawmakers across the country have moved to weaken the independence of state courts, says Douglas Keith, who studies courts across the country at the Brennan Center for Justice. Some states do elect Supreme Court justices by districts, and there can be good reasons for doing so, Keith said. But unjustified efforts to change the composition of state courts can weaken public confidence in judges. And like the big orange god said, can you believe we have judges? Why do we need judges? If the calls for geographic diversity are just a thin veil on an effort to make the court more political or capture more seats for a political party or ideology, then there's a problem and a misunderstanding of what judges' responsibility in our democracy are, Keith said. The Office of Representative Russ Diamond, the measure's main sponsor in the House, did not return a request for comment. He has previously said the change would ensure there was more geographic and ideological diversity on the court. And after all, we do have a lot of economic anxiety here. Why do we need Pittsburgh representation on the courts? Well, that was an embellishment by this reporter, but hey. The change would require a constitutional amendment that voters in Pennsylvania need to approve through a ballot referendum. Before it goes to the ballot, it needs to pass the state legislature in 2 consecutive sessions, so the earliest it could appear is 2021. And the measure has already passed the Pennsylvania State House and is being considered in the Senate. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. It is brought to us by Josh Israel out of the American Independent. Kentucky's newly inaugurated Secretary of State appeared to suggest that the real purpose of a strict voter ID law being rushed by the legislature's Republican majority was to impact the state's 2020 U.S. Senate election. Secretary of State Michael Adams, Repug of course, who was sworn in earlier this month, testified before the state legislator's State and Local Government Committee on Wednesday in favor of SB 2, which would require most citizens to provide a government-issued photo identification to vote. Adams urged the legislature to enact the law soon and implement it immediately so it would be in operation this November. Wow. You mean when you got the gerrymandered maps, or you have like voting machines that haven't really been approved because it can be hacked, we can't get rid of those by November. Oh no. But you gotta have your voter ID. And you know what they're using as the excuse? There's foreigners trying to impact our elections, so we have to have voter ID to make sure foreigners don't impact our election. They're not impacting the election by going to vote, you idiot. They're hacking your machines. They're brainwashing your voters. I'm a little concerned about delaying it past November because functionally it would delay this until 2021. And then this is a 2022 bill, he said. My problem is that I think if there is any election we should be concerned about ballot integrity, it is this one, he continued. This is obviously a high-profile election. You've got a very competitive Senate seat in a very competitive election for essentially determining which party controls the Senate. You're going to see potentially foreign actors. You're going to potentially see domestic actors messing with this election. Oh, you mean like Democratic voters? Is that what you're talking about? So to me, I think it is better to have this going into effect for 2020. And of course, the bill later passed out of committee on a party line vote. Anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Democratic Governor Tony Evers' plan to create a nonpartisan redistricting commission to draw Wisconsin's electoral maps may put pressure on the Republicans who control the legislature to consider an alternative plan. But it won't force them to do anything differently next year, and GOP leaders made clear they will not change course. The legal fight over the Republican-drawn maps in Wisconsin in 2011 was one of the key gerrymandering cases that went to the U.S. Supreme Court. The court refused to hear the lawsuit, resulting in the current maps remaining in place, despite Democrats' claim that they unfairly favor Republicans. Wow. Sounds like the anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press are doing the both sides thing here, aren't they? I wonder why. Back to the article. The Supreme Court later ruled last year in similar cases out of North Carolina and Maryland, shutting the door in federal court on gerrymandering arguments by essentially saying that states are free to draw electoral borders as they please, and if it looks like Democrats are going to win, we got to stop that in the bud right now, bud. Evers was part of the Democratic sweep of statewide offices in 2018. Oh, the blue wave. and Democratic candidates received more total votes than Republican ones in Wisconsin's U.S. House and State Assembly races that year, but Republicans won 5 of the 8 U.S. House seats and 64 of the 99 state assembly seats because majority rules and majority wins in the democratic process is obviously unconstitutional and unfair. An Associated Press analysis of the election results showed that Wisconsin's districts had one of the largest Republican tilts in the nation. The efficiency gap analysis, which is intended to flag potential cases of gerrymandering, indicated the Democrats would have been expected to win at least one additional U.S. House seat and at least 15 additional state assembly seats based on their average share of the vote in Wisconsin's districts. That would have been enough to give Democrats control of the state assembly and an even partisan split in the state's congressional delegation. Wow, they got down to the gist of the thing, a few paragraphs in at least. Well, good for you, Associated Press. Those findings only increased the argument from Democrats that the maps were illegally drawn to benefit the Republicans. Democrats have tried in vain to have the legislature change the redistricting process and create a nonpartisan commission. Republicans show no signs of budging, dismissing the proposal Evers laid out in the State of the State speech on Wednesday as political trickery. Oh my, projection, what be thy name? Well, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, you do know that we go through weather from around the world. And you should know that we're going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, not so fast. Much like the action in 1917, the kudos have come on hard and fast for this one, and it is an achievement. It's a minimalist story told in an epic way. A British enlisted man from World War I is pulled from trench duty for a mission across enemy or disputed territory to warn another division that a planned attack is a trap. As the action is being set up, we become aware of the film's visual convention, which is that the whole thing seems like a continuous shot, with the camera following our heroes out of the grimy trenches through a gruesome house of combat horrors towards their destination. Oscar-winning director Sam Mendes and top-notch cinematographer Roger Deakins combined for a detail-rich first-person ride that is suspenseful and leaves no doubt as to the nature of war. Because of the technique, we see the protagonist, George McKay's Lance Corporal Schofield, for the film's entire runtime, which makes his acting grade that for the movie, and it's good. But 1917's visual style comes at a price with respect to character development and historical context. The reason why Schofield's partner is chosen may be obvious, but it's worthy of some dialogue, which could have noted its cruelty and maybe worked in the morale issues amongst British troops at that point in the war. And we find out little of the characters' inner or family lives, and no effort is made to contextualize the overall struggle in the light of nationalism. War may be hell, and it's presented so here, but this war featured no moral imperative. Unquestioning patriotism, which has its fans in high places today, fills the void, and this movie leaves it unquestioned. See 1917, but then go home and watch All Quiet on the Western Front. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. The remora is an unusual fish. It hitchhikes on other sea creatures using a sucker on its head.
So you can see them on whales, dolphins, sharks, turtles. They stick to scuba divers, they stick to boats, they stick to other fishes and other remoras.
Brooke Fleming is a comparative biomechanist at the New Jersey Institute of Technology and Rutgers University. She says sticking to other animals is a pretty good strategy.
They avoid predation by sticking to large animals. No one's going to attack you if you're on a shark. And it's a food source. Many of them pick parasites off of the host they're attached to, as well as eat bits of food that are flying by and poop. They also have the ability to potentially meet other remoras for mating on the same organisms.
But now her team has discovered that the fish have another unusual quality. They're sensitive to touch, a type of touch previously unknown in the fish world.
Up until now, we did not think that fish had the ability to sense touch in this way, or to sense dragging and shear, which is, of course, going to be very important for a remora that's attached to something that's moving very quickly.
By dissecting the fish's suckers and looking at the tissue with electron microscopes and CT scans, they saw an unusual push-button-like structure, which they determined must be a type of mechanoreceptor, enabling a sense of touch.
And so we just started pouring through the literature, trying to figure out what this was that we were even looking at. And the only thing that has this same structure, it's a push rod mechanoreceptor, are monotremes, platypus and echidnas.
The details are in the journal Royal Society Open Science. And the study suggests that this sort of touch perception arose independently at least twice in the animal kingdom, in remoras and monotremes. And big picture?
I think the real story here is that we just need to look for different sensory capacities in organisms to a much larger extent, and that there may be mechanoreceptors in all kinds of organisms that we just haven't found yet.
Because there are a lot of ways that life forms have come up with to make a living. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. Occasional aches and pains are an expected part of life, but for many people, pain is a constant companion. Dr. Chad Helmick is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. He's joining us today to discuss ways to manage chronic pain. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Thank you.
Chad, how many people in the U.S. suffer from chronic pain?
In 2016, 50 million adults had chronic pain, which is pain on most or every day in the past 6 months. More interesting, though, is that 20 million people have high-impact chronic pain, which is chronic pain that also limits their work or life activities on most or every day in the past 6 months. This is a problem because chronic pain is associated not only with symptoms, but with anxiety and depression, reduced quality of life, and the risk of opioid problems.
What are the most common causes of chronic pain?
The most common causes generally relate to bones and joints, like low back pain and arthritis, but there are many other causes: headaches, sickle cell disease, fibromyalgia, surgery and injuries, and many, many others.
Is chronic pain more common in any particular group of people?
Yes, it occurs at all ages, but it's more common in older middle-aged adults and in the oldest 85 and older. It's also more common in women, poor people, and those who live in rural areas.
How is chronic pain treated?
Well, the first thing to do is to get a diagnosis, which can help guide treatment. But the thinking about chronic pain now is that it becomes a chronic disease by itself, regardless of the cause, and that can cause significant problems. The real goal in management is to have a manageable level of pain, not to get rid of all pain. There's several steps that can be taken, and these are sometimes difficult to do because of barriers to access. But it makes sense to do the simplest and safest things first. And these are non-drug steps. Things like physical activity. Walking is perfectly good to help reduce pain. Also, self-management education can give you some confidence in managing chronic pain when you're on your own. There's also physical therapy, occupational therapy, psychological therapy, better sleep, which usually means less alcohol, and seeing a chiropractor or getting biofeedback and massage. If that's not enough, non-opioid drugs like Tylenol or Motrin and Advil or naproxen or Aleve can help. If those don't work, then it's time to consider something stronger. Sometimes that's opioids, but there's not great evidence that opioids are good for long-term pain in most people.
Do you have any advice for people suffering from chronic pain?
Well, it's important to work with a variety of providers who are working together to help you. The goal, again, is manageable pain so you can live a productive life. This can include physical therapy, most people can walk, to treat any underlying depression or anxiety, and to avoid further injuries. Finally, the National Pain Strategy is laying out a strategic roadmap to improve pain management system in this country.
Where can listeners get more information about managing chronic pain?
Listeners can go to the NIH website, nih.gov, and type in National Pain Strategy.
Thanks, Chad. I've been talking today with Dr. Chad Helmick about ways to manage chronic pain. If you're experiencing daily pain, talk with your healthcare provider to ensure you have the correct diagnosis and know how to manage your condition. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Did you know that when you vote for president, you're actually not voting for your candidate?
I'm Tom Hartman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
Sorry if this is unsettling news, but what's really happening is that you're voting for electors to the Electoral College who have pledged to vote for your candidate and will, presumably, if your candidate wins the popular vote. It's a winner-take-all system, usually statewide, although in Maine and Nebraska, each congressional district decides one electoral vote. But sometimes electors don't vote as they had promised to do. Indeed, in 2016, 7 so-called faithless electors, 5 pledged to Trump and 2 to Clinton, jumped ship and voted for neither of those candidates, which didn't matter because the Electoral College vote wasn't that close. But in another year, a switch in a handful of electoral votes could actually decide who becomes president. In 2000, for example, the final Electoral College vote was 271 for Bush, 266 for Gore. Historical precedent supports the idea that electors indeed can change their mind and vote for whoever they please. That said, the Supreme Court, which previously has never decided this issue, has just taken a case from Washington State which raises it precisely. A decision is expected by June. Way better, to be sure, than the case being before the court in November, when the electoral outcome could hang in the balance.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because democracy and advocacy begin with you, and freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1984. That was the day the Nestle Corporation agreed to terms in order to end a 7-year international boycott against the company. The boycott was over the unsafe and dangerous ways that Nestle marketed and sold its baby formula in third world countries. The boycott began in the United States in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It spread abroad to Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, eventually reaching 10 countries. The campaign was largely grassroots in nature, with local activists organizing different actions. In Massachusetts, boycotters ceremoniously dumped Nestle products in a Boston Nestea party. Finally, after 7 years, the grassroots organizing met its goal. Nestle agreed to follow international standards for baby formula marketing. Boycotts are an important way for consumers and workers to protest corporate practices and social injustice. There have been several very influential boycotts in our nation's history. In the 1950s, the Montgomery bus boycott challenged racial discrimination in one southern city and helped to launch the civil rights movement and empower a generation to fight for equality. In the 1960s, Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta of the United Farm Workers called for a boycott of grape and lettuce growers in California. That boycott helped to bring national attention to the fight to improve pay and working conditions for Latino farm workers workers in California. In the 1980s, a campaign against goods made in South Africa was a stand against that country's apartheid system. In 1984, the members of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union Local 10 refused to unload a South African ship in the port of Oakland. Their action stood as a powerful statement of international worker solidarity for racial justice. Boycotts have long helped to change the course of history as citizens stand together in solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life, and indeed, the French 77s are available for your virtual imbibing pleasure. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 43 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the mid-50s, overnight lows in the mid-40s. Areas of patchy fog early, a few showers this morning with mostly cloudy conditions during the late afternoon. And we're expecting, and it is currently raining, I should say, we're expecting about a little less than a quarter inch of rain until the late afternoon. And then a little bit of drying out with considerable cloudiness overnight with an occasional rain shower about midnight. And then tomorrow, we're expecting at least a third of an inch of rain and at least that much on Sunday. And then maybe over an inch on Monday. We'll see how that is when we meet up on Monday, indeed. All right, let's see here. Pollen is rated at none. Thank you for letting me know that there. The air quality index is good at 30 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.11 inches. Visibility is down to 4 miles. And relative humidity is at 97%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. London is 44 and cloudy. Gay Paris is 38 and mostly cloudy. Wow, that's getting cold there again. Let's go to Rome, though. Rome is 54 and only mostly cloudy. Kyiv is 37 and fair. Kabul is 30 degrees with that ever-present smoke. Hong Kong is 67 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 47 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 75 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 49 and cloudy with a flood advisory, so take care because you're getting lots of rain now. And New York, New York is 45 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Michelle Nichols and Raphael Sater of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. United Nations officials do not use WhatsApp to communicate because, quote, it's not supported as a secure mechanism, end quote. A UN spokesman said yesterday, Thursday, after UN experts accused Saudi Arabia of using the online communications platform to hack the phone of Amazon chief executive and Washington Post owner Jeff Bezos. The independent UN experts said yesterday, Wednesday, they had information pointing to the possible involvement, you say? Possible? Involvement of Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in the alleged, you say, 2018 cyber attack on the billionaire Amazon.com Inc. chief. He's also the owner of the Washington Post, by the way. They called for an immediate investigation by U.S. and other authorities based on a forensic report by Washington-based FTI Consulting. The report alleges that Bezos' iPhone was hijacked by a malicious video file sent from a WhatsApp account used by the Crown Prince. When asked if UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres had communicated with the Saudi Crown Prince or any other world leaders using WhatsApp, UN spokesman Farong Haq said yesterday, Thursday, the senior officials at the UN have been instructed not to use WhatsApp. It's not supported as a secure mechanism. So no, I do not believe the Secretary General uses it, Hawk said. He later added that the directive not to use WhatsApp was given to UN officials in June of last year.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers. C'est tout.
Elizabeth Hocroft and Eric Beach of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Britain scolded the United States for refusing to extradite a U.S. diplomat's wife who was involved in a car crash that killed a British teenager. British prosecutors had requested the extradition of Anne Sakoulas over the crash last August in which 19-year-old Briton Harry Dunn was killed while riding his motorbike. But the State Department said yesterday, Thursday, that Sakoulas had immunity from criminal jurisdiction and that to extradite her would set a precedent. If the United States were to grant the UK's extradition request, it would render the invocation of diplomatic immunity a practical nullity and would set an extraordinarily troubling precedent, the State Department said. British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab called the U.S. ambassador in London to express British disappointment. Dunn's family have said Sakoulas was driving on the wrong side of the road at the time of the crash, near an Air Force base in central England used by the U.S. military. Sakoulas was given diplomatic immunity after the crash, by the way, and left Britain shortly after the accident. Her lawyer has said that she will not return voluntarily to Britain, possibly to face jail for what she calls a terrible but unintentional accident. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and for the week. So you do know that we're going to meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night and all weekend for all the breaking news of impeachment and other news breaking as it breaks. And we'll meet up on Monday right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.